I'm Lauren, I'm an OTA. This is Kim, OTR, and we are starting a new YouTube channel, OT in the Real World. And today we're going to be talking about therapy brushes.
So we get a lot of questions on brushing. What is it? Why do you do it? So this may be a couple part episode, so today we're just going to talk about some of the theory behind it and what brushing actually is. So these are surgical brushes, otherwise known as therapy brushes. I got a bunch of these off of Amazon for $12.95. There's also a lot of good therapy websites out there that you can order from as well. Before I talk more about brushing, I do have to mention and give a nod to Patty Wilbarger and her approach and brushing protocol. I was not personally trained in that. Back in the day, I got a SIP certification. It's not a thing anymore, but the master therapist training me was familiar with the Wilbarger brushing protocol and trained me in that along with her own advice. And at this point, I no longer know what's mine and what I learned back then. So I just wanted to mention that and give credit where it's due. Excuse me. So why do we brush? A lot of our students are still developing their nervous systems, and what I picture is like a big messy web and a jumble of activity going on. And brushing is a good way to just streamline all of that activity and get everything organized and more calm. It doesn't actually work that way. That's just a nice vision that I keep in my head sometimes when I'm brushing a student. So brushing is like deep pressure input for most of the body. And deep pressure input is that proprioception, which we think of as an organizing input. Generally, we think of it as calming, so we think of a student that's overly aroused and we want to calm them down, so brushing is useful for that. But it can also bring up a student who's a little bit under aroused, looking like they're falling asleep. It can also alert them. So brushing and proprioception, in my mind, are kind of like the great equalizers. So they're useful for that. And then a lot of our students, especially Lauren and I work with kids that are on the autism spectrum pretty frequently. And those students often have what we call tactile defensiveness. So they're really aversive to pretty much any touch, but most especially light touch. And so brushing is going to help. They do not like that
at all.
Not good.
Not good.
So brushing is going to help hopefully desensitize that. Also, it may sound funny to us well-organized adults, but some of our kids with autism are pretty disconnected to what's happening with their hands. So brushing is a nice way to just get some body awareness, and especially if you're brushing on the hand, you're alerting the student to where their hands are, how they're feeling, and if it's part of a routine, it actually helps orient them to the activity that's about to start. What are some of the questions people have?
So typically what I hear is when to do it. When should I be brushing? Before a tabletop, before recess? A lot of questions about when.
Back in the day, the theory was brush every 90 minutes. And although that's probably best practice and wonderful, this is OT in the real world. So we don't really see that in the school system. I do, however, use a brush just about every day with my students, and I tend to use it as we're about to sit down for a fine motor task for the reasons that I mentioned before. But if recommending for a student in a classroom, I might say after an activity that's particularly exciting and over-arousing, like recess or a fun music and movement activity, if the student is having a hard time coming back to a time of focus, then brushing can be a great activity then. It's great to just build it in as a natural part of the routine as a student's coming back from, a period of high arousal to a period of needing to sit down and focus at the desk. What other questions do people have?
A lot of people want to know, how hard should I be doing it? Is this deep pressure or light pressure?
Right, so a couple things to remember with a brush. To answer that question, it's deep pressure. You want to use firm pressure. You're not pushing so hard that you're knocking the student over. Generally, they're a lot smaller than us. Though you just mostly definitely want to avoid light pressure. We're going to do another video in which we actually brush, but some things to remember are the way you orient the brush. When it's oriented vertically, it's a much firmer pressure, so we say to orient it vertically over clothing, and when you're on direct skin, you're going to orient it horizontally. we're going to go over technique in the next session, but we just wanted to give you a quick orientation to the therapy brush.
And if you have any questions about brushing so far, you can go ahead and hit the comments and we can get back to you in the next video with some of those answers. Okay, thanks again, and go ahead and click subscribe and like.
See you next time.